visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So he took admission 2014 and he is 2018 passed out. If we see activities and societies, he was assistant cultural secretary of Xavier Institute of Engineering for 1 year and HOD of publicity team for cultural fest Spandan and technical fest transmission for 1 year. Then contingent leader of cultural fest Spandan and technical fest transmission. Also been a part of drama team. So he was very active member. Okay, he was very active member in our department, and I can tell you that I was seeing him from the first year. I think he was there in the first year in my division only, and
Yes.
I I don't remember even a single day he no he spoke to us in a bad way, and he was so active. And I used to tell him that Austin, you should go to some no Bollywood or Hollywood because he used to look like a model. And still, if you see, and he used to do modeling also. Austin, whether I'm right, you were doing
No,
modeling.
no, no, no. I had taken part in the fashion show in college or something like that.
Okay, okay, okay. And yeah, and now he is there in BNP Paribas, okay, more than 2 years. And if you see, he is there as an associate software engineer of level 1 full time from March 2020 till present, and associate software engineer full time. Then what he has done basically, no he graduated from here and then he did a diploma in business analytics. And I think he has done from the Mumbai University only, and with distinction. And then if you see the different stuffs which he has done, like Python and Tableau, Power BI, statistics, mainly he's focusing, since he is there in the BNP Paribas, he's having main focus in no business area, right? So there he will be able to tell more about no his part over there. But whoever the students they go over there in the BNP Paribas, they have to learn regarding the financials a lot, I have heard. So maybe Austin will be able to clear to us. So Austin.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. So that was really flattering. But yeah. So it's not. I'm not that great, and yes, I'm not a model. Uh, I used to, and he was very kind to say that none of the teachers had problems with me. I was never in their good books. But
Austin,
so
you are my favorite student always.
so okay, so let's get on with the lecture. Quick introduction. What I do, I'm a software developer at BNP, and yes, people who get into BNP really need to learn more about finance because it's a bank. So yeah, so you need to learn that. About data science, after my engineering, I signed up for a diploma in business analytics because I thought like data science was the way to go, and I really wanted to learn more about it. In our curriculum, basically, we do not have many subjects for data science. I believe now that's not the case. You all are learning Python and all in the curriculum. We had some subjects. I guess Om Prakash sir had taken a few of them, fuzzy logic and all that, and Vijay sir had taught big data. So that caught my interest, and that's why I took that forward. Getting to what we are expecting from this lecture today, firstly, I'm not like a expert in data science. I'm going to give you an overview of what you need to know and what you would expect if you take a career in data science, because uh, most of the careers, when they try to pitch it to you, it's too sugar coated. So I'll try to give you an overall idea of what you'll expect, and if you really want to go, and if you want to go, what is the checklist that you'll need to take. While we are at it, we'll go at a small demo of convolution neural networks where we can check out how we process images to come to conclusions as to how the machine learning works for us. So first we need to understand. So if I, sir, if you don't mind, I'll get started with the lecture now.
Yeah, Austin, one question was there
Yeah, sure.
that you did this data science business analytics from the Mumbai University.
Yes, so there was this company named QRS that had some teachers who teamed up from the Mumbai University. So there's this college there, Mumbai School of public policy and economic. So from there, with collaboration with Mumbai University, so I used to go to Kalina itself in the university,
Oh,
and I
so
had
it's still
weekend.
there. It's still there running.
Yes, it is. So they have like I was the second batch, so it was a fairly new thing that they had started. Um, Teachers
Okay.
per se were very good. I would say that that course was a 1 year course.
Okay.
It does not it you can go see, it's like in any course, like even now in com science you might have learned everything but you don't know everything. If I tell you tomorrow
Yeah.
to deep dive is your part, you they will give you an overview of everything. So you will they will
Hmm.
start with so how any data science, you will start with learning R and Python. You all as computer scientists, you all will have a leverage there, assuming you all already know any one language. So even if you
Right.
know any language, Python is very easy to learn, and R as well. And when it comes
Right.
to data science point of view, I would say you all don't focus on coding much because that comes secondary. If you can prove your analytical skills better, people will hire you. And you can always debate that, I will learn Python later, but you can't debate I will learn machine learning later. So you have to play on your strengths and weaknesses over there. So when it comes to that course, it started with R and Python because it was more or less for people who wanted to switch careers into data science. So when it came to age category, I was the youngest. So it was, I mean, the oldest guy was like some 45 years or something. So like that, I got a very wide range of people to interact with. All of them at managerial positions where why they wanted to use data science was a question. For me, I did not know why I wanted. I just found it cool, and I wanted to see what it is. For them, they had particular agendas, like people into HR wanted to get into HR analytics because that is the future. If you see right now, if you all have been you all are in, which sem are you all in, seventh or eighth?
They are in seventh.
So now you all obviously have started applying to jobs, right? So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
see
Yeah. Many of
the
them they have
guys
got
who
also.
so that's great, thank you,
Yeah.
congratulations to all of you all.
Yeah.
And you all, when you all make your resume, people whoever must have trained you for the interviews must have told you that you have to add all the keywords and everything. So why is that? Before, when HRs used to look at resumes, they used to filter based on their experience. Right now, the first round of filtration goes, if you're applying off campus, of course. On campus, everyone gets a chance. Your resume itself is filtered out because you are not having the particular skill set according to the analysis machine. So the role of the HR keeps on decreasing year by year. Even things like in the office, to be honest, the HR has to do many things, but right now they can't do because like what does the HR do? Will hire new people, will take care of the people who are there, and presume how many more people they have to hire. So they have to calculate this thing called as an attrition rate. It means how fast this guy is going to leave our company. So if you see these guys, L&T, Capgemini, they will hire all of like a ton of 30 guys at 3-4 lakhs per annum and lock you all in. Why is that? Because they know that you will be locked for 2 years. We'll train you, we'll put you on something, and they are mostly 90% sure that almost 80% or 90% of the batch will leave within 2 to 3 years. So that is their analysis. And how was that? So in the next 2 to 3 years, they will again hire people with 3 lakhs. So they are maintaining their budget with that. So on an average, if you see, LTI hires more than 2 to 5, 10,000 people a year, with freshers when you're saying. So
Oh,
managing those
great.
kind of numbers require these. So these HR guys have to evolve themselves to stay in the industry. So most of these guys, as data science grows, their job role decreases, and as the less important you become in a company, the more scary it is.
Right.
So once you get posted anywhere, you should be asking yourself that question: can they live without me? If the answer is yes, then you have to be doing more things. So
Right.
that's how you survive in the industry, and there's no age that you stop learning or something. So they started with coding because most of them were not from com science. I had the leverage because I did not know Python much. I was more of a Java developer, but Python was easy to catch up because it does not have much of syntax issues. So it started with R and Python, then it moved to statistics. So statistics is something you cannot avoid in data science. Statistics is something you will have to learn when it comes to matrix, understanding how distributions, normal distributions work, how regression works, what is the difference between regression and logistic regression, or so you'll have to learn a lot of those things. You might not have to learn everything, but a basic understanding would be required, because when it comes to interviews, they might ask you certain things like that. What is this? How do you
So
predict this?
these people, they had one subject, machine learning, in sixth semester. So all these techniques they have already learned.
So that's great. So like in an interview, they might not really ask you like code linear regression or logistic. They'll ask you that, okay, if I have a data set of, now when do you use regression and when do you use classification is what they'll ask you. So you need to know how to apply them more than how to do it, because they know that in the end how to do it is very, even some guy who doesn't know, if you had not learned that subject and I told you tomorrow I need a code for regression analysis, you can google it and get it done within seconds. I mean, it's not that difficult, but to know that I had to apply regression analysis is the question.
Right.
So like suppose you had a data set of weather reports, and you had to analyze them. So first you go and ask the business that what do you want me to do. There are two kinds of questions they can ask. One is what would be the weather tomorrow. In that case you'd be using regression. You will get exactly, it'll be 40 degrees to based on the model that you have made. And if you want a question like would it be hot or cold tomorrow, then you'll be using classification. So
Right.
that model will classify, okay, these temperatures are hot, these temperatures are cold, and that's how it goes about. So when the new thing comes, it will tell that if it's hot or cold. So that's about it. And then it moved forward to, once we have got the statistics clear, then it gave all these econometrics when it comes to modeling all these regression and understanding what they are, how to calculate the error and everything. Then it moves through getting domain knowledge. Domain as in, if you see the subjects, that there was like HR analytics, finance analytics, media and marketing, then there was healthcare analytics. So all of these industries. So when you go into becoming a complete data scientist, domain knowledge is something that you would have to have. So you will obviously not start as a complete data scientist. You will start as a Python coder, or you will start as someone who does data cleaning activities, or you will start as someone who only is into NLP, which is natural language processing, or something like that. And then you keep building, 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 and then you call yourself a data scientist. So when do you call yourself a data scientist? When you can give end-to-end product delivery, right from when you capture the data till when you predict an analysis. And this involves you to have the technical knowledge, the mathematical knowledge behind this whole process, and also the business knowledge as to what you want to predict. So in data science per se, like if you are concentrating on something, I would request you to concentrate on a certain subject, because in the end, if you're hired to do something and you go through the entire process of machine learning, AI, regression, everything, and you tell them something, okay, out of everything I've said that A is equal to B, and in the end if they tell you that we knew that, why did you waste all that time? It doesn't make sense. So you need to understand what the problem is and how do you want to solve it. And so I'll walk you through that entire thing and to how we'll do, and towards the end I'll give you a question, like you can ask yourself a few questions as to, do I want this really, or what are the careers, and if you are not taking data science, is it still important to learn it or no? So let's get started. So um so we start with data analysis. So when you are assigned to a project, there will be a series of things that you will have to do. So when you start, the immediate first question that you would be asking anyone. So if you have a data science team, so the first task that you all will have is to identify a problem. So you just can't take data and run some things on one column or do indexing. You will not get anything if you don't know what you're finding. So first you need to understand what you need to do. Suppose you have a company and they have a sales record, and they say that in we're having more sales in Kerala, but we're not having that many sales in Maharashtra. and but we have more branches in Maharashtra, so I we don't understand why this is happening. So and then that's a business case. So now you have that. It's a very abstract thing, and now you'll have to go like how do we start with it? So first you'll have to gather. So first stage is with the stakeholders. You'll have to understand what the problem is and what parameters leads to sales and what is no, which you'll have to gather data. The first is data preparation after problem definition. Sometimes you would not always have data preparation as second. It can be sometimes you would not know what to solve and they just hired you and say that we have a bunch of data, let's see if you can make some sense out of it. So in data preparation stage, there'll be two stages where either you'll be collecting data and the second is you'll be cleaning up that data. So most fresher jobs, no matter how fancy they'll sell it to you, they will try to direct you towards data cleaning job roles. Is what I've seen a few of my friends who have tried to. So it's not bad, but you have to make sure that your team is comprising of the entire set. You shouldn't be in a team that only does this. So if you're looking for a job role, you need to, because if you're getting into something, your starting job really matters sometimes, because then you waste time if you're not at the place that you want to be. It's not a bad thing, you can be, and then you can be like, okay, I don't want this. But it's good to start with a place that you like. So make sure that you are in a complete end-to-end data science team. It should not be that you are only into data cleaning and so in data cleaning is like basically cleaning up the data, getting everyone to a similar format, because usually data is not coming from one place, it's coming from multiple places, multiple machines, multiple systems, and the columns will be different, the types of data will be different. Some will have text data, some will have image or something. You'll have to figure out how and what of this data relates to your problem and collect it. So once you've done with that, then you go ahead creating your model, whatever analysis you do. Suppose you want image processing, you'll be using CNN, or if you want say fraud detection, you'll be going into random forest or something like that. So that is when your model creation comes. So when you get your data, usually if you all have already studied, you all will know you'll take your entire data set, you will keep something aside to test for later. So you divide your data into training data and test or validation data. So that validation data you keep aside, that is the data that the model will never see to train. So you train your data, then you test it, and then you provide the management with the results saying that, okay, this is the learning rate, this is my training loss, and this is the accuracy of my model. And based, so you'll usually not have one model, you will create multiple models, because if you just go to search, when you'll be learning machine learning and all in textbooks and on the net, there is a problem definition which is very crisp. So you know what you have to do, and you will get the exact output what you have to do after that process of say machine learning or some analysis that you have done. But usually in business cases, you do not know what is the output. You know a rough idea what the output is. So you will have multiple models to predict different things, and then you would go back to the management saying that, this is it, and this is what we have predicted, and that's how you go. And then if it goes well, then you deploy it. Deployment comes in two stages. If it is a risky move to do that, what you're saying. So imagine you're in a supermarket and say Walmart or something, and they ask you to do market basket analysis. If you're aware of this algorithm, it what this does is simple. It says that just analyze all customer data, tell me what goes with what. So if someone's buying milk, he's buying eggs. So everyone, 80% of my customers who have brought milk have brought eggs with it. So I will place milk and eggs side by side uh, in the store, whatever the row or something in the mall. So what does that do? It, even those the remaining 20% that brought milk and don't buy eggs, now they will also try to buy eggs, because firstly for that 80%, it's convenient now. Okay, it's faster for them and it's easier for them to shop. And the remaining 20% that did not buy eggs also will think about buying eggs, because probably because these 80% are buying, there's some major reason that such a big chunk of their population is buying eggs and milk together. So they will drive these 20% also to uh, buy them. So that is how these discount offers come. uh, if you see Amazon, when you click on a item, if you see the bottom part, it will also, customers also brought this, customers also brought that. So that is somewhat like market basket. So their basket is the cart. So what customers have brought together, a customer who brought this first, in the next 6 months he brought this also. So when you buy a phone cover, they will also suggest that, this cover is the most brought cover for say this particular phone, and this tempered glass also people. So that is not that some guy selling a Redmi Note or something said that, Are, just add this. This is via their algorithm that they saw that major part of their customer base brought that. So that can change over time. If suppose everyone instead of a blue cover brought a red cover, then next time that suggestion would be a red cover, because they think their customer base is moving towards buying that red cover with this phone. So that is market basket analysis. So, and major part in, once you build the model, is to sell it. uh, Data scientists all over do not, I mean, most companies have data science role, but very less, I would say minimal percent of them actually listen to them. So they will just take you as a performance metric guy, where you will be presenting it to the manager. So you have to sell it in a way that they adopt your thesis, because anything that you say, no matter how much you back it up with data, it's going to be a theory, and it's practical. Every higher management would put his or her experience before it. So you have to be good at selling as well. And once you sell, also you have to be very sure if you're selling it. So suppose the sales are 2 crores this year, and it has been 2 crores since a long time, and they are tired of this. They're saying we're not growing. So they've hired you, and you made some particular models. You say that, we close some certain stores over there, and we try to build up stocks. We hire this, whatever you make a whole plan based on the analysis you have done, and you present it to them. One is they'll reject it because they think no, it might even not. And if they accept it, you have to make sure that it delivers. And if it doesn't, then you're in trouble. And if it does, your manager might take the credit. That's not the. But in the end, you have to be very convincing also as a data scientist. So that comes with a whole different skill set. So now that you've got the data, you will deploy it and allow. Now suppose for market basket analysis, as I was saying, suppose you did your analysis and you said that everyone who buys uh, like uh, like milk buys apples with it. Now the manager of the store will come and tell you that, this is stupid. I cannot keep milk and apples together. It makes no sense. It's going to spoil the whole show of the. Um, no matter how many people buy that together, I'm not going to do it. So that's that guy telling you no, and it might be true. Probably when you keep milk and apple together, people will be not like the appearance of that. So that comes in that deployment phase when you try to do it, but you call a test data. So you'll call some customers and you'll ask them that, do you like this setup, or do you want us to switch it to the first one? So most of these softwares, when they launch a beta version for a few users. So similarly, when you deploy a software, which is a major change, you try to take a small pool of users to ask for their opinion, who have not been involved in the development process, to come up with their idea. So that is how we go. And so that is about how you have to go about making things. So now let's move on to a small example, when I'll just try to present my screen. I've not made up PPT or something. I'm going to speak more than. Let me check. Uh,
Yeah, your
Yeah,
screen
your
is
screen is
visible.
visible. Okay, sure, good. Alright. So let's start with what I'm. So first, let's start with what we are aiming with neural networks. So when it comes to neural networks, we are basically, as the name suggests, we are trying to replicate this neuron. So what a neuron does is, in our brains there are multiple neurons which fire certain signals when we see and interpret certain things. So our agenda is to create a human neuron and connect it in a certain way, which it's together is called a neural network, to form a decision making system. So it will take various inputs, however abstract they might be. So one neuron might not do the job, so you will need multiple. So in our brain as well, when we look at a chair and we do not know, how do we know it's a chair? Because we recall in our neurons the chemical impulse that we have seen million chairs. We know how that chair looks, we know the types of chairs, we know the classification of the chairs, we know how they look, we know how a broken chair looks, we know what the colors of the chairs, we know how to sit on the chair, we know the spelling of a chair. Everything recalls. When I said the word chair, everything that I just said fired a number of neurons in your brain to tell you that what this guy Austin is talking about. So something similar we are looking to do. So now when we're going to neural networks is, we try to replicate that. Now when we come to artificial convolution neural networks is more for image processing. So for image processing, similarly, how we look at things. When I look at a car, I look at it is a broad vehicle. It has four wheels. It has four doors, steering wheel. Something that I look at it and I find the features, or even the shape of the car, even the outer lining. If I see a shadow, like look at this, it's a shadow of a bike, a drawing. But you know it's a bike because you know that two tires and a handle and a headlight in front means it's a bike. Probably if I took a tire out or this headlight out, you might not be able to say what it is, because in your brain you are not able to match the features to the bike. So similarly, when we go for image processing in convolution neural networks, we'll have a set of images. So imagine this is the model after it has been trained. So this is our model which is ready, and we give an image here. It will try to find certain features, and once major part of the features are matched with a bike, it will tell me that, oh, okay, it's a motorbike. Maybe a few features matched of a car, like two tires matched, or something matched, and something of like a guy sitting on the bike probably match something for a human, but the maximum. So that's how even our head works. We might not feature identification really works well. If you know how well, sometimes even the smallest features tip us off. Like when our neurons look at things, like in our brain when we process things, very minute things we notice without us noticing that we are noticing it. If you've noticed that there was this ad of this dental clinic, I'm not sure which one was it. There was this photo of a girl in a group smiling, and she had a tooth missing, like in the front. And the caption was that you noticed that missing tooth so much that you forgot to notice that she had a missing eyebrow. And it was true. Like when I looked at it, I really never noticed the missing eyebrow. So that is what we really look for: distinctive features in people that we remember. Like in the end, we are humans and we all look similar, ideally. If an animal asks, like, all of us sort of looks the same, but we look at other features on people, their eyes, their nose, and we remember those special features of people which make us distinguish who is who and what is what. So that is something that we want the machine to do. But a machine is not as smart as we are. At one glance, it cannot really fathom all the images that we are looking for. So for that, we'll be using a series of layers so that we reach to our goal. So now, what are these layers? So now, like, this is a car. So if you've in mathematics, if you're aware of the word convolution, so in layman's terms, what convolution does, it takes two signals and it applies one signal on top of the other and it creates a third signal. So as if you all use Instagram, you all have Instagram filters, right? So whenever it's like basic image processing, you are just change the pixels by a certain, or multiply or divide them by a certain amount, you will get a new filter of an image. So similar thing that we are looking at doing. The reason we are trying to filter things is that the machine would like to see more. Now we cannot just use one filter and put like a, so there'll be multiple neurons in this layer, multiple neurons ahead. So suppose this one, now how convolution works is something. So suppose this is the matrix of the image. The convolution will take a 3 into, suppose the convolution we are doing with a filter of a 3 by 3 matrix. So it will just take this matrix, create boxes of the pixels and try multiplying it by the same value. So if we see the convolved feature would be something. So the multiplication values would what be the inside the neuron is, when we apply convolution is what it will be multiplying it with, and it will create a new matrix which we call as a convolved feature. So we'll have multiple neurons or layers that we would say that will look at different features of the same image. So at first, when we look at this, there will be a certain image. We'll process it. I'll explain pooling in some time. So once we process it, initially we'll have random weights. Over here, the weight will be the this feature matrix that we are mapping it to. So this into 1, into 0, into 1 up, this whole matrix will be the feature matrix. Initially, when we compile the model, these matrices are randomly generated. Even you might have worked with machine learning models. When you start, the weights are random usually. Random weights, you define the initial weights, or you can ask the machine to just take random numbers and start the generation. So when you start with random generation, it will divide into say 100 random features and take it forward. And what pooling does is it will just take the if there are two types of poolings that are majorly used. One is max pooling and average pooling. So what this will take is it will take this 3 by 3 matrix and take inside that 3 by 3 matrix what is the max value it will remove out and just store that. The reason we need pooling is if you look at this image, one car image, we are suppose we have 512 nodes over here. We are making 512 copies of this car image and 512 filters we are applying to it. And after that, if we have another say 10,000 images of cars to learn, it will take forever. So what pooling does is it, because we have so many nodes, pooling does not really matter that much. So when we take this matrix and we convert it into this in an over huge image, it does not really make a large difference. So pooling is your friend when you are going for image processing. It saves a lot of time, and it's usually very minimal feature loss you will get in pooling. So once you go ahead with pooling and convolution, is in the end you'll flatten it and apply a function like softmax to decide what you have actually done. Now to understand this whole thing, we can uh, so TensorFlow has this one nice thing called as a neural network playground that they have on their website. I'm not sure if you have looked at it. So if not, then I will send you all the links later after the lecture. So in case, so this is like a website, just a web page that they have where they have a number of things. Sorry. Okay, so if you see this is a neural network, you can choose whether classification or regression. So now if I take classification, you'll have multiple data sets that you can just try. So once you've learned classification and regression and you want to see this thing in action, you can probably try to use these things. So suppose I take this particular data set, I say I want a sigmoid activation function, and my ratio of training to test data would be 30% or 30%, or let's, okay, 60%. There's no noise. So you can add noise. If you look at the image properly, once I start adding noise, it's difficult to classify it because there'll be less the noise in the data, the more easily you can classify. So that usually comes in the phase of data cleaning to remove these outliers and everything. So that is usually a very important phase. Of course, you will never get zero noise in the data. There will always be noise. So now if you can even decide the learning rate, regularization, what of the problem type and the number of neurons, and you can add hidden layers. So if I run this, it will run for epochs is the number of times I run it through the model. And if you see the graph, it is slowly trying to learn where it is. Because it's a sigmoid function, it moves as the sine wave, and it's not really helping us if we can see. So now we we know that this is not really helping us. So we'll use a tan function and probably increase one hidden layer. So we'll have more features to decide from when we come to this final decision of what is what. So now if I start the same thing, you see that it will start analyzing it faster, and as you go forward, it will keep on filtering, and you will get a feature. So you'll have to wait for some time, but we just never add layers just for the sake of it. Usually it's a lot of trial and error when you add that. No, I don't want to classify. So now we are using ReLU. Now you saw how fast did it come to this conclusion. So what usually we try like that only. If you do not really know what you use, you'll use different activation functions. If you do not know the math behind it, usually if you are into that full math behind it and know how that derivative works and everything, it'll be easier for you to choose. But even if you don't, you'll have a set of things that you know, and you can keep trying till you get it, because it's not difficult to make models, it's usually difficult to compile models. So you can have a smaller test data and you can try to make some models yourself. So but now this was easy because there was no noise. Suppose I increase, like now there's some 15% noise. So now it will still classify, but it'll take some more time to reach. If you see, the test loss is still not zero. It will take a lot of time, and we might not get zero because of the lot of noise. So this is some a place that you can really experiment to. I'll send you all the link of all this. Yeah, once you all start learning proper, so you can take different types of data to see how this acts on different types of. So if this kind of data, how the graph, and as the model starts learning, you will see the curve in the test loss if it's decreasing as we go forward, and we have created the classification. So this is how your neural networks would usually work. Not the coding part, but of course visually if you make the model. So usually you will be designing a model first and then going to the coding part. So for the coding part, I will take you all to a short example. So there was this good video that I saw. So this code is not something that I have done. It's something that I've picked up. So I have no ownership of this, but so there was this video on TensorFlow machine learning zero to hero by Google, where they had given a demo of how to make a rock paper scissors predictor. So what was expected of this is that probably you want to make a game that will play the game rock paper scissors with you. When you're done, you will have like a rock paper or scissors, and the computer will take your photo, and it has to predict what sign did you make. Either did you make a rock or a paper or a scissors. So it's not the entire game, it's just that the part where the prediction works. So we'll have so in this we have three types of data. One, we have rock paper and scissors. We have 840 images of each, so it's a huge data set. So I'll give you the link. It's easier to do it on Google Colab or online platform, because it's independent of your personal computer's processing power. I will talk about that later, how to practice all of these things easily. So we have three types of data. We have rock, paper, scissors, and if these are the image file names, if you see, we have rocks, paper, and total records we have 840. And if we look at the images, they are something like this. So random rock, paper, and scissors of different types. So what do we need to look in this? So we need to find out features. So every hand would have a different shape. Like some would have real bulky hands, some would have real thin hands, some would have long nails, some would have darker tone or a fair tone, or some would have, you know, really probably hairy hands, or, you know, you need to have a lot of. So this uh, a huge training data is always an advantage. The more data you have to start with to train your model with, the more. So basically, it's like an exam, right? The more you study and go, the more likely you are to answer a question in the exam. So the lesser amount of nodes that you look at, the lesser probability that only that will come. So the more the more data this training model has seen, and the error rate that we will get in the end of how accurate the model is would be more accurate. So sometimes we overfit data. If the training set is really small, we will overfit data. Means it will know that only this hand is stone. Suppose we had only one picture with a stone. If I made a like I had a gesture of a stone, it might not recognize it. But according to my model, it has 100% accuracy for stone, which is not the case. So those kind of cases are called overfitting, when we try to overfit our model for that data set. So it will work very good for that data set, but for the outside world, it might not. So that is where that testing data really comes into show. So I'm not going into the extreme coding part. It's simple. We're tracking and we're storing all these images. So these are the images. Now we are going to we create our we have a training data and a test data. So the training data will be called, and for the test data, we are calling it validation data. So now we are going to keep the target size for the image. So they might not be all the same type of images. So the pixels might be different, and the matrix values will be different. So we're going to restrict it to a 150 by 150 matrix. So let me just jump to the model. So now this is the major part of the code where we are creating the model. We're going to compile the model, and then we're going to fit the model to our data. So now how does this if you look at this model, it 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 is a sequential model where everything would be done one after the other. If you see, it has three layers of convolution and pooling. So it is taking convolution, then it is pooling and making it a small matrix. Again, that small matrix is going through 64 layers of, again, 64 you can say nodes, which, see, like how would you read this? It has 64 nodes, this layer. It will apply a 3 by 3 filter on this data. It will use the activation function ReLU, and it input shape is this. So initially you will have to take this input shape because you will have to impose that on that. After that, it will take care of itself. So if you have, we have three layers of convolution and max pooling, which will, as I said, take features and, you know, apply it to them. 1 second. Okay, okay, let that be. And in the end, we flatten it and we use a dense 502 layer of activation function ReLU, and then we consolidate it using softmax to a 3-bit output. So 3 will be rock, paper, scissors. In this case, it will be alphabetic. So I guess paper, rock, and then scissors. Okay. So what do the how do these things work? Okay. So if we do not use the middle layers, it will take 150 by 150. It will take all of this. So in the last layer, if we see, uh, in the last layer, if we see, we have a 502 bit, 502 units of ReLU neurons, then getting consolidated with an activation function. If we directly do that, we will be taking this entire 150 by 150 image inside it, which is not really uh, convenient because it will be really expensive to really use this image for 512 layers. So what this does is the convolution helps is in it gets 64 layers. Those 64 layers go to another 64, then go to another 128. When we come till this last layer, our features are very, very, what do you say? Look at this example. So this is the first layer where we have a smiley face. So the first convolution layer will probably separate, okay, a circle with something written in it, okay, only the outer circle, the probably only the outer line, what is the shape, and so on and so forth. For 62 sort of features they'll try to find by separate filters. And this feature will again go for 60 more type of feature reduction, and it'll go ahead. And so if you understand the number of deep layers that you have, your precision of getting features would be more. But also, as you keep adding this, the time to train will be costly. So you have to try to get a balanced trade-off between them. Also, if you have too many features, then choosing is easy. If you have less features, suppose I had only this layer, only one convolution layer, and then I'm trying for max, I might get this right. But what if I have a sad face? So I might not really be able to interpret more features. I'll my the bank of what so this features to find will be less. So when a motorbike comes, if I only know key tire, so probably if I go through multiple layers of features, I'll break this motorbike into so many parts that it's near to impossible that I would not predict that it's a motorbike. So something similar we need to really do for this machine itself. So that is why we need these multiple layers of convolution and pooling. So convolution will apply the filter, pooling will reduce that into a small picture. Pooling helps in reducing the data size of the image. So again, convolution divide that new image into multiple features, again reduce the size of those features. And in the end, that dense network will decide what is the output of your uh, this I've shown you. This is convolution. This is again convolution applying the filter, and pooling will take multiple filters and get you that. So let's go back into this. So what this will do is that it will take. We have created the model with four convolutions and one dense layer of 512. Now we have to compile it. So compilation is not here. Compile does not mean the normal compile that we have in coding where the converting to bytecode one. Over here, what this compile will do is it will initialize all these variables in all of these. So it will initialize all these 3 by 3 matrices and prepare the model to run. While you compile, you will define what kind of loss, what function would you be using to calculate loss. Then there has to be a function to optimize. So once you know that you have made a mistake, you have to go back and change these filters to correct that mistake. So that will be your optimizer. And what kind of metrics are you looking at? So you'll have to learn more. So if you go to the Keras website, it will show you the types of losses that you would have. So you'll have to really try to understand all of them, where they are used, and how you can use these into what. So uh, slowly and steadily you will get to all of these categories. It's not important that you use all of them, but so you'll have something that tells you, okay, you've gone wrong. There is something that tells you, okay, correct this, and you might get it right. So you keep on doing it, and in the end we do this model.fit generator. This is where we actually run the model with the data. So we pass the trained data, we say run for 25 epochs. Usually you will have to run for a lot more. If you see over here, we have ran it for 132. Then that's when we got a proper model. But over here, I guess for an image processing, 25 was fine. And you give it the validation data. So what this will do is it will train this data first, and then it will validate the data to give you the error. So let's see. So if you see a summary of this data, I've removed this in a separate image here so that you can see. So um, first we have done a 150, 153. Now, why does this convolution not give me the same dimensions? Because if you see in these, when it's doing convolution, it loses a certain a layer of rows up and down while it's doing convolution. That's why that a little bit of dimension reduction is what you would see when in the first convolution. So it does that, then it'll pull it. So you see the number of pixels that we saved once we went for pooling. Again, it will do another convolution. We again lost two rows, and again pooling. And in the end, we will be left with 7 by 7, which is like really small when it comes. So this final 512 layer that we'll be checking features bit, it will only have a 7 by 7 image, which is really good because the amount of detail that it will be capturing would be tremendous. So for that kind of detail, you'll have to use that. Now, when we go to coming forward, uh, yeah, so if you see while we are running these epochs, uh, the time that it has run and the loss. So accuracy is zero point 0.3 for the first one. Now, why is the accuracy zero point 0.3? We have we have three images: stone, paper, and scissors. Your random guess, if you do not know what it looks like, you have a 1 in 3 chance that you'd be right. Right. So the first very epoch, you can see that that holds true. So you have he has a 1 in 3 chance that he'll get this right, and then the training loss as well. And as we go forward with training the model, you see that our accuracy keeps increasing: 37, 60, 75, 95, and once we've come to 25, we've reached 98. Okay, this is really good. That's because the data is really good. Usually you'll have a lot of noise and a lot of unwanted data that would not allow you to reach a 98 or a 99 that quickly. So this is how it would look. So usually you'll have to decide on the number of layers that you'll have to apply. You'll have to decide on the activation functions that you'll have to apply, and you'll have to decide on how many times you want to run this. So over here it's 25, and then you get the data, and then you can test it. So if you see the training accuracy to validation accuracy, so training accuracy was good. The validation was around, it started from around zero point 0.3, and then it went up to around 98. So that's how you can plot your training accuracy to validation in the graph. And then you can then in the, I'll send you this code. You can probably take a picture of your own hand and upload an image and check what would it give. So if you try to upload, it will tell you either stone, papers, or scissors like this in a matrix. So they have added scissors, so scissors comes in the end, means it made a right prediction. So paper, it's giving you another, so it could not really come to a very good conclusion over here. Over there it came to. So that's how you can look at things. So that is about a small demo on convolution neural networks. Of course, if this is too overwhelming right now, don't stress on it. You can step by step, you can start learning one by one model. It doesn't really make, because if you go to see in Python, you don't really have to do much. Everything has been taken care of by separate functions. So you just have to decide what. So once you have, suppose this diagram ready, or you know that you want 6 neurons here, 7 here, 8 here, or whatever, making this is not a big deal. Similarly, now how do you go about practicing this? Now, if you go on the net, you have a lot of ton of tutorials on everything, and how do you really get to something that will help you grow? So basically, you have to go to unfamiliar ground. So if there's this site called Kaggle, which a lot of data scientists use. So it's very useful even if you know much or even if you don't know much. If you see, you can get a ton of data sets, notebooks over here. So see the number of data sets you see. You can search for anything. Like if you see your Netflix movies and TV show, if you go and see what do you have over here, It will be showing you. So you can download the data sets here, or you can operate on these from this itself. So over here we have show, movie, title, director, actors, country, everything. So you can and they'll ask you for something from it. So what they need you to do. So this is a report from some TV shows, and if they have an agenda or they don't. So now, if in case you do not know what you need to do with this, you can probably see what people have submitted, and based on what who has like, there are 66 comments on this, so probably you can like see what simple matplotlib and visualization tips is given on the same thing. So if you see, you can open his notebook and you can check what he has coded and how he has coded, and how he has tried to analyze the same data. You can also you know take this notebook uh, for myself. Okay, what am I did. Okay, that was very, I've not verified my account. So you can open notebooks yourself as well, and create a new notebook. So if you can also create your own data. You can take your, so suppose some of you, when you go for high level model training and creation, you might not have that processing power in your system. Like for image processing, you'll need a like a very good graphics chip and all that. So you can come to sites like Google Colab and Kaggle, where you can actually tell that I need a Python notebook, and it will give you a notebook, and it will give like everything would be installed, all the libraries. You will not have to worry about, the environment will be there, all the libraries will be installed, and also you will have a good what do you say, a CPU. You can this if you see, you're already getting like a good 16 GB RAM, everything. You can add GPU and everything. So in case you're having not very advanced laptops, you can really try these things, are really helpful. And also having a good profile on sites like these helps. Similarly, if you're going for a job at a very high tech based company, they'll check how many projects you have on GitHub. Probably if you're going for a very good data science role, they'll ask you, do you have any notebooks on GitHub, and can we look at them, something like that. So it's easy. You can start trying one by one. uh, you can if you have familiar ground, you can search data sets that you're familiar with. Suppose like I know like banking industry, so probably I'll uh, try for what am I getting from banks, or if I have certain uh, fraud detection. If I found to learn fraud detection, then credit card fraud detection data set. So you will get the industry that you're looking for, and you can really practice with these. So, so that is more about. Okay, so that is more about what I'm going to present here. So now let me tell you all now what you all will be doing. Now, if most of you all must have got jobs and now you are trying to apply. So for getting jobs like these, you need to really firstly get your statistics, and more or less you need to know everything. Know everything as in you might not need to know how to do everything, but you need to know that okay, something like that exists. So first you need to get a very broad view of everything, as to what kind of algorithms are there, how many exist, what I know and what I don't know. What you don't know, knowing that is also important. So jot down that. You don't need to learn everything. Focus on, as a fresher, they're not going to hire you to do everything over there. You need to just know key. You say that I know R and Python. Now you'll say, why R and Python for data science? It's not really uh, I mean, is it mandatory to use R and Python? The answer is no. You can do the same things in Java or C or anything else. Why R and Python? Everyone uses that. That's the only answer that you have. And because everyone uses that, many companies create libraries for only those uh, programming languages. But it's not that you cannot do regression analysis on Java. You can. It's in the end, it's a math formula. You can do it on any programming language. But having uh, a good command on either R or Python would be required. Depends on company to company. Some prefer Python, some prefer R. It depends on their seniors and their teams what they are using. more or less, if you see when it comes to machine learning, the functions and the way you use these functions is just the same in R and Python. The syntax might change a bit, but you won't find that really tough. Getting data science jobs also require, so if you are, it'll be really fun if you track. One is you apply everywhere, good chance you might get something you like or you might not. Second is you track via industry. So if you want to, you need to ask yourself that what kind of data would I be looking at. If you're like working at Hamleys, I don't want to look at toys data all the time. You might not want to work in, even though you're working as a very good data scientist for a company that's that huge, but you might not really feel like it. So as your first job, you need to really enjoy it. So try to track down. Don't be very selective because usually people don't like freshers. So that is about it. When it comes to getting job roles, there are different kinds of job roles that you can get. One is that yeah, data visualization. Excel goes without saying that you will have to learn Excel. No matter how much Tableau and Power BI go ahead, the higher top management only understands the language of Excel. So that is something you'll have to learn. Uh, while I'm talking about Tableau and Power BI, business intelligence roles. So most of these companies have a lot of data, but they cannot usually read this data so much time. So just there are jobs that you need to read this data and present it to them in a way that they can read it faster. So dashboarding and if you all have used Tableau or Power BI, you can see the types of graphs that you'd get. So BI guys, like these guys who are just into interfacing and showing how presenting data is also a very important job. People think that it's not a big deal, but knowing this is good. So that is one kind of job that you can get is a just to show BI related activities. Second is you will get a preliminary job where you will have to know Python and R, and you will be having a what do you say, a data cleaning job, or creating models where you will not have the decision to know why you're doing it, but you'll be told to do so as and you'll have to do. The third one where they are trying to analyze is an end-to-end data science thing. Over there what they are expecting is that we have a problem, we might have people to help you, but we need you to solve it. So in that place, domain really matters. So if you are going to a company, say Amazon, you need to understand e-commerce. How does it work? Or what kind of project are they giving you? Are they giving you a project that you know uh, you really want to minimize their delivery times? They have a very crazy project. Amazon has a very to minimize the delivery time across the city. So they that best path and all, how to choose and everything. So are you into that, or are you into their application where the hardcore business of the UI to predict products? So how do you decide when to have a sale? If you have a sale, how much discount would you have? If you have a discount, how many people that you predict would buy that, so that you'll get some kind of income later on. And uh, then later on, something like that. So like for me, if you when you're going to be an end-to-end data scientist, you need to really get into the domain part of it. People ignore it because they get drowned into tutorials and how to do this, how to analyze, but they do not know. So when I actually give you a random data and I have nothing to tell you about it, and I say that this is our company's data and we need something out of it, you need to really get on to things. For that, places like Kaggle will help you, where you'll be in unfamiliar grounds where you need to know. So like for me, if I have to learn, I'll be more inclined towards financial analysis because I'm already working for a bank, so I can have some leverage on that. But if I do not, I can go into marketing analytics, where I learn more about how these marketing strategies, customer, how to pinpoint. Usually when they release a product, they do this analysis of what is the target customer base. So to determine that is also, people pay like crazy. So if you're in the field and you have good domain, getting a good job is not that difficult, but you need to really try your best when it comes to that. And okay, I mean, I don't think I have much. We are running out of time. So, do you all have any questions?
So Austin,
So, Austin,
will you see if anybody's having any question? So all of you, all the students, please, if you have any doubt, you can ask.
like, even if you're not going for a data science role and you still are into the normal software development, I'm assuming that you all will go into that. So, if you're a developer, you're a tester, you're into support, or you're into the management, all cases may, if you know, have a leverage on data science, it gives you a little hike not when it comes to a little slighter edge, because wherever you are, performance metrics come into place. When you are into development code quality, when you're into testing, how many defects, what is the, a lot of analysis. And if you, once you start working, you'll notice that they will track you hour basis. Most of the huge companies would ask you to log in time. So even though you enter in for a particular task, so for, like, I'm giving you example from where I work, I will have to, if I'm doing task A, I will have to log work in that. Say I spent 3 hours on task A. When I have task B, I have spent 3 hours on that. And inside that, I've spent 2 hours on analysis, 1 hour on coding, and half an hour on unit testing. Even that, the level of tracking increases over time. And you'll have to, I mean, usually the big tech giants would have this. Not all startups and small companies might not be that involved into that, because they don't really, because they are going to make you work anyway. But when it comes to this, if you have this capabilities, you can provide dashboards for your own team, and get visibility to the higher management, and that's where you stand out. So you need, as I said in the start, you need to make yourself important and show that this guy Austin, I don't know who he is, but he has some good knowledge on this matter, and probably when they make decisions, they might involve you. Like, recently in our teams, we had a really big shift. We had we have a umbrella of 5 projects in mind, and we had people shifting around. And we have this, if you've studied the scrum model, we have scrum of scrums. There are multiple teams working in the same team with lesser responsibilities, so that helps faster. So managing them, knowing which team needs how much capacity, which scrum needs how many developers, needs how many testers, needs how many business analysts. So knowing that and predicting that is also helping nowadays. People are moving to dashboarding, right now. Dashboarding is like the new thing. So if you're into creating, good reports on Excel, Power BI, and Tableau, you really get a wide range of jobs open to you. So ideally, you would want to provide an end-to-end experience of a data scientist, but usually it's difficult to learn everything in the start. So get into somewhere and then start learning and building, and that's how you go about it. Okay, your chat.
So I think nobody's having any doubt. Yeah,
Thank you,
Ashwin.
Yashwin.
Yeah. If you want to speak, you can just speak.
See, industry by industry, if you ask, like for me in the banking industry, if I'm making any kind of, suppose I'm making a model, the last error thing term is very important. They cannot afford even even if I have 99.95, now they will say that no, you cannot. You have to be close to perfect for banking. But if you say you're making a model for someone doing intraday trading, uh, someone who's into the stock market and doing, and if you tell him that 60 or 70% accuracy hai, he'll be more than happy to buy your project. Why? Because he's not going to make one trade. He's going to make a number of trades where he's going to keep, stop losses on the bad ones. And even if the odds are good, he might end up making a lot of money anyway, even if he has a lot of failed trades. So based on the use case, so both of these use cases are finance. But a bank cannot afford to make mistakes, but an individual investor can, because he has money to spare. He can make mistakes and earn, because the higher there is, the more the money, and the more money you can lose. But yes, that's about it. And when it comes to your career, you should not, like, I mean, in the start I've seen many people taking too much stress about it. It's not, I mean, in the end you'll fall out somewhere, and you'll just don't lose hope and stop studying and saying that, "Arey, I can't do this." it all falls into place. I personally did not have a lot of marks. I got into BNP solely because I knew Java. Even imagine my SQL also was weak. I mean, I had studied Java in the third year, and that's how I got into BNP. Majorly because I was good at selling myself. They did not ask me many questions. that is that's an edge. You should always know how to sell things that you are not. Then eventually you blend in. I mean, it's not really and don't really compare salaries that he got more and she got less and that. In the start 1 year you can ignore that and focus on your job role more, because you getting 12 lakhs to be on call support doesn't make sense, because your experience doesn't count even though that your salary is good. So try to get quality jobs over high paying jobs, because quality jobs will get you even higher paying jobs later. And if you get into a stupid job which does not demand much of you, you might not be able to grow much in that company itself, because they have anyways hired you, and you might not be able to even switch because nobody will hire you for that kind of money with no experience. So be careful of where you go. Most of these new people try to sell you with stupid job roles that try to stay in this same industry. You have a com science degree. Most of y'all would want to go into computer science, I'm assuming. Some of you would not. And if you don't want to, don't just go just to try it out. Maybe I'll like it. Try. If you're into, say, I don't like coding and you're into marketing, try for marketing. It's going to be difficult because you'll be questioned severely, because you've taken 4 years to study com science and why you want to go. But then in the end, in the after 10 years or 5 years, nobody will care what you studied. Likewise, now nobody's going to ask you 10th में कितना आया. Same way, nobody's going to ask you क्या पढ़ाई किया. It's your job role that will speak for yourself. So, any questions? I am not looking at the chat. Okay, Karthik is asking, how do you achieve human level accuracy in models? You can't. Our brain is way too complicated. Our learning capabilities are, you can try to match it. So right now we did stone paper scissors, but if I did stone paper scissors with the same models, 25 pips, we got 98% accuracy. Why? Because it was in a controlled environment. We had stone paper scissors with no background. If I had background of another hand behind me, if I am doing stone paper scissors with another hand on my head, it might get confused, but a human might not. So you will have to teach it. Eventually, it might learn and come very close to it. If you see like this speech, if you see Alexa, Siri, in the start they were really, when Siri came out, it was really sloppy. I mean, it would get the basic things like call someone or this, but if you go to like say a big sentence, it was really messing up. Right now, if you see Alexa and Siri, you can actually talk to them, like talk to them. Even the new Google AI, they learn over time, make mistakes, learn. Likewise, we do not know right now. You might have very limited information about something. You might think that I know only this much in Java, and I don't know if I can get a job. You don't know, right? You can try, and if you get rejected, you will again try. That's your second epoch. I mean, you'll of course increase your accuracy over time, and that's so on and so forth.
Uh, so I just request all of you to switch on your video so that we can view photos with Austin. Mandar,
Yes, sir.
just click a few photos, everybody.
Okay, okay, sir.
Yeah. So, Austin, I would like to ask one question.
Yeah.
How much you are involved in their trading businesses? I mean,
Um,
whether
involved
you
as
have to
in.
learn about market also.
So yes, when you join BNB, usually they have a 3-day course on. They teach you everything about trading and marketing, which is really good. So so of course you
Okay.
need to know their banking sector and know the amount of risk that you carry, which is good. It also gets you involved into. I started trading and all. Stock markets I started when I joined BNP. Of course, it is not that easy, because working for a bank also makes me sensitive. Sensitive as in I have information that probably others don't have. So I have restrictions. So it's good and bad at the
Right.
same time. Uh, For the domain that I work in the regulatory sector, where each and every trade that occurs in the market, we are expected to report them to a certain regulator. So I'm into that business.
So on every day after 3:30, you do that particular thing.
No, it's live actually. And I no, it's not. It's automated systems that do it. I develop code for that.
Right. Okay.
So, so in that also we were trying to introduce some machine learning and everything, but it's really hard because people, the Indian convincing senior management is difficult because they cannot afford mistakes in this. Because if I make a mistake over there, it can cost them billions, and I mean they can't even fire me to
Mm-hmm.
justify it because it's
Mm-hmm.
so. So that is something. And finance is interesting, of course. You can learn personal finance. I mean, all of y'all are starting with your careers. I would really like all of you to start investing. It really makes a difference in the long run. I've seen people working for 20 years and have no savings whatsoever. It's painful. And people with a proper 3-4 lakh also can save more than a guy who's earning 15. So don't really look at earning minus expenditure is equal to saving. Do earning minus saving is equal to expenditure. Of course, in the start, we not have a lot of money to save. It's understood that we have a cash crunch because we are paid less. India is like that. We can't help it. But you can what you can do is that you can start learning about it. Most even I had no idea till I was like in the fourth year. You can start learning small things here and there, how to invest, what to invest, what long. I mean, you should just learn the power of compounding. Once you just look at that, there's no turning back. You'll see, like, if I put into FD in 10 years, how much I've had. And if you compound, I mean, things like PPF, it's a good government scheme, but most of us don't even know about it, which shouldn't be the case. You should start investing in that. It's a good retirement fund to keep for yourself. Start planning your retirement now. I know people start planning it when they're 30 and it's already too late.
Right.
You might, at your age, till the time you retire, and then minimum you'd want, I'm not scaring you, you'd have to have at least 4 to 5 crores at your rate, counting inflation. And that's the minimum that ideally you should have. So, and there's no way that you're going to save that just by going for a job, unless you get like a job which pays you 70 to 80 lakhs. That's not going to happen. And as you grow older, your responsibilities will increase. You'll have to pay your, probably you'll have to start giving back to your parents. You'll have probably some other new problems in your life, like your husband or a wife. And you'll have kids, or you'll have other things. You'll have tuition for them. You'll have your own things. You'll have a car to buy. You'll have a house to buy. You'll have 10,000 other things. Now that you do not have any responsibilities, it's easier to save because only expenditure that you have is yourself, and you can control your own desires. That's what we think. But yes, something like that. In the long run, even if you save 20,000 a month, which is a big amount now that we are not earning, but say 10, you start with 5, and then every year you say that I will increase my saving to for 5 to 8%. In the long run, you'll make easily. I mean, you won't even have to worry about your retirement. I mean, if you keep your
So the origin, we all have the issue that I mean, not even one subject is there in our no entire curriculum from the school to till graduate,
for
right?
finance, I understand that. I
Yeah.
totally
So
get
that
it
is the
because
problem.
it's the Indian taboo not to discuss salaries.
Yeah, yeah.
And that has been put into us via the companies only. If you go, first thing they're going to tell you is that you're not going to discuss your package with anyone. That is the first
Right.
thing they're going to tell you. Why? Because then you'll compare. Then you'll be like, ये तो same काम कर रहा है इसको और 5 लाख क्यों मिल रहा है. So that is how it goes. So they don't want you to. And because people get judgy also in Indian people are judgy. That's so people are afraid to tell that he'll judge me that I'm only earning this much or I'm earning too much. He'll think I'm rich or something like that. But then you need to at least start from your own house. Very, 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 very rarely somebody knows. I mean, how many of you all know how your house is budgeted monthly?
They must
I
be knowing
doubt.
about the pocket money.
it's difficult, but because that's things that even parents don't tell you, right? Because they think that our children will start judging us. It
Right,
goes all the way. So you need to start looking at different things. You want, I'll create a small message for that also, and I'll send you a little links that you can start learning. And if you'll start now, I mean, it's way before that you should. And starting now is amazing. I mean, you'll understand the benefits of saving when you're 30. All your friends would be like, ah, shit, inflation, stock market fell, and you'll be like, ah, so what? So that's you need to be that.
So, Austin, thanks a lot for taking out the time and sharing such valuable information with us. And I'm very happy to see you after so much time. Okay. Uh,
Likewise, sir.
is there anybody else also there in the company with the same batch?
Um, Glenis was there. She just left.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
there was, if you remember, Ashish from my
Yeah,
batch.
yeah.
He was a geek. He was not very involved, but he was very. So he got a very good project. So his project
Okay.
basically was bad. That's why it was good. Bad in a way that everyone in his project left. So he got to
Oh,
actually do end to end. Like, he was the guy developing, he was the guy testing, he was the guy putting it on production.
oh,
So he got a good experience. Glenis was working. She just left like a couple of days back.
Asha.
She was into Angular and all that. She was
Mm-hmm.
into the KYC business of
Mm-hmm.
Rank, and yeah, it was good. I mean, for me, I was lucky. For me, that's what I think. My team
Mm-hmm.
was kind of very weird, but that is what I wanted from them. So I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But yes,
So,
it's not always that easy.
thank you very much, Ashti. And in the future also, we'll be in touch with you whenever we need any information regarding any topic.
Sure, sure. I'll forward my contact details. If anyone needs anything, you can just text me or call me. It's not a big deal.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So it's time we can terminate now. And I can talk. I'll talk to you later. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to know many things with you.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Hello, sir.